days, if the government, if the president refuses to address the demands of Nigerians, of protesters, we would re-strategize and will sustain this protest across Nigeria. And that is not a threat, that is a promise.
It did not address the removal of fuel subsidy that has seen prices of goods and food increase across the country. The president did not even empathize with protesters who have been killed by security forces across the country. So we think that this is unempathetic. We do not think that the president really understands us.
Nigerians everywhere around the country, in the cities, in towns, they are demonstrating against their president that he is corrupt, he must step down. Bagamba babikoye bagala entebe agivemu ate balabe nga bafuna omukulembeze omulala oyo mubbi kati nno yo omukulembeze agamba nti bano bali mu kuwagirwa eggwanga lya Russia. They are being supported by Russia and the President Vladimir Putin because the protesters are moving around the cities and towns waving Russian flags, and the president says Putin, Vladimir, is behind these protesters, the Gen Zs. But the Gen Zs are saying, no, we are on our own and we want to take you down to a galo vehicle. So, no mukulembeze omundi. Kali katobe video.
Hello and welcome. We begin with a focus on Nigeria. Before the protest began on the 1st of August, the Nigerian government blamed foreign entities for instigating people and for trying to sow unrest in the country. Now, with the protests underway, the government's concerns over foreign interference have heightened further. This after some protesters in northern Nigeria were spotted waving the Russian flag and chanting slogans for Russian President Vladimir Putin, saying, "Welcome Russia." But Russia was quick to distance itself from Nigerian protesters waving Russian flags, saying that neither the Russian Federation nor its officials are involved in these activities and do not coordinate them in any way. Russian embassy in Nigeria said that Russia does not interfere in the domestic affairs of foreign states. It added that intentions of some protesters to wave the Russian flags were personal choices and do not reflect any official position or policy of the Russian government. Russia also expressed respect for Nigeria's democracy, acknowledging peaceful protests as a right. However, the Russian embassy condemned any political disruptions or acts of violence. The Nigerian government has said it will not tolerate calls for coups or protesters waving foreign flags. Nigeria's military chief also called waving Russian flags a treasonable offense and said those found guilty will be prosecuted. Authorities have arrested a number.
Whoever found with the Russian flag waving it, wakukwata ne flag ya Russia, ngojiuba, ngo chanting Putin welcome, you'll be arrested and you'll be accountable for your deeds.
Of people in the Kano city in connection with the incidents of waving Russian flags during the protests. In recent years, Africa, especially the West, has been witnessing an increase in Russian influence. Junta-ruled states of Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger rejected the West and pushed out their troops, favoring Russia for its security. Nigeria's End Bad Governance protests were launched nationwide on the 1st of August and have been led mostly by the youth. The protesters are calling on President Bola Tinubu to step down over the economic hardships and systematic corruption in the country.
Over the next 5 days, if the government, if the president refuses to address the demands of Nigerians, of protesters, we would re-strategize and will sustain this protest across Nigeria. And that is not a threat, that is a promise.
It did not address the removal of fuel subsidy that has seen prices of goods and food increase across the country. The president did not even empathize with protesters who have been killed by security forces across the country. So we think that this is unempathetic. We do not think that the president really understands us.
According to rights groups, the protests have left at least 13 people dead nationwide. But the Nigerian police insist that only 7 have died, while also blaming the deaths on terrorists, a local vigilante, and a reckless driver who ran his car into a crowd. Over 700 people, including journalists, have been arrested by the Nigerian military. On Monday, only a few hundred people turned out in major cities. This after Nigerian security forces launched a deadly crackdown over the weekend. The commercial hub of Lagos, where demonstrations have been largely peaceful, saw about 100 people at the protest venue.
Experience and see what happened at the NSAS. We were there, it was a peaceful protest until governments ordered the military men to open the firearms. It was only God that saved me. We were many there. Do you tell me the same governor, the government that doesn't care about the masses? Is it the same governor you want me to go and endanger my life again in this process?
To spoil something is very easy, but to repair it is very hard. It's not what you can just, if you spoil something within 3 days, 3 months you are still repairing it, you have not yet through with it. So since the president has spoken with them, let them wait. Let's see the outcome, and we'll back it up with prayer.
The capital, Abuja, saw no signs of protest. Curfews have also been imposed in parts of the north, which has seen some of the largest and fiercest protests. A tough police response and a call for a protest pause by the president appear to have dampened the demonstrations. Now, for more, we have with us Inibehe Effiong, an activist and a human rights lawyer, who is joining us live from Abuja. Thank you for being with us on this.
Nendo zowulira ekigenda maaso mu Africa n'ensi yonna. The Gen Z are starting to wake up. Bategedde nti kati ensi yaabwe obuvunaanyizibwa bulina kuba mu ngalo zaabwe so si mu mikono gy'abo abazeeyi abakadde. Kuba abazeeyi abakadde batandika kubba ssente za miwa musolo buli kimu bakyezza beekolerera kulya kufankuna. Naye kati the Gen Z etegedde nti ffe tulina okulungamya ensi eno ku lw'abaana baffe n'abazzukulu baffe ebijja mu maaso ekyo. Kyovulaba Nigeria kati balemedde kugaye batandika nga lumu guno gwe tulimu ogw'omunaana kati waliwo ziri munaana, meaning they are 80 days they have taken down the road, striking or demonstrating, asking the president to step down to get another president because for him is corrupt. And they are waving Russian flags. You've heard that, chanting Putin welcome, Putin welcome, Putin sansokulaba webale kujja kintu kigenda kwangwa. Ebitambula bigamba mbu Putin yandiba yabwadde dda n'emmundu ebikompola biri lwasa mayinja nga bagenda kwanganga president abalina okumuta bo budde bagambye nti whether what or what he must leave. Kati president akankana agamba mbu Putin yabale emabega abateekamu ensimbi obuwanana basobole mbu okubanga bajjako gavumenti ye era mbu yetagenda kukikkiriza okubanga Putin yawagira abeekalakaasa okumuggyako. Muwulidde Putin byawozezza nti yetakiriimu tabiriimu naye ebyo simpakabiraba oli yeegaana ekyo naye ate nga yakirimu akiri mabega. Nolwekyo the Gen Zs bannayuganda nammwe pick a reef mumanye nti no waliwo ekirina okukolebwa tutereze ensi yaffe.
Broadcast. I'll jump right in. There are reports that Russian flags were waved and chants for Putin were raised by some protesters at the ongoing demonstrations. What are your thoughts on this? Is there a Russian influence or agenda in the protest?
No, not at all. I don't necessarily agree with the conclusion or the suggestion that because some persons are waving the Russian flag or carrying the Russian flag, that in itself indicates Russian involvement in the protest. I do not think Russia has any interest in the protest that is going on in our country. This is a national matter. This is a matter that is limited to our country. There is no international dimension to it. The protesters are not protesting against any foreign policy of the government, really. The people are basically complaining about hunger. People are basically complaining about corruption, the cost of governance, and several other issues that Nigeria has been grappling with over the years. The high, rate of inflation, which has only gotten worse under the current government of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. I think those who are carrying the flag are either misinformed or mistaken. I don't think they have any link with Russia. However, the military have said that doing so amounts to treason. As a lawyer, I don't know how that is treasonous, because if you say treason under a law, that will imply that a person is waging war against the state with the intention of overhauling or intimidating the president or a governor. I don't think that is the intention of these individuals. But calling for a coup is condemnable. We're against it. And we also do not support the carrying of a Russian flag. It is actually quite ironic that it is Russian flag that is being carried, right? In fact, if they carried an Indian flag, I'll feel more comfortable, because India is a democratic country. Russia is not. Russia, you have Putin calling the shots. There is no allowance for freedom of expression. There is no allowance for political participation. So to now carry Russian flag, as if Russia is the United States or Britain or some other democratic country, is actually ridiculous to me. I do not see any point in that, and I hope that will stop. And if this is being sponsored by some mischievous elements, we hope that that is going to end, so that the protesters are not distracted from the real message that they're trying to convey to the government.
I want to get back onto that real message, but first, there is a lot of Russian influence in the region. Is there a legitimate concern that Russia could be promoting the demonstrations with the aim of destabilizing Nigeria? I know we have seen that denial of any involvement by Russia, but what are your thoughts on that?
I think that would be difficult to prove, really. Yes, I concede that Russian influence in Africa, West Africa in particular, has been growing. We have seen that in Mali. We have seen that in Niger. We have seen that in Burkina Faso and the Sahel generally. But you have to also look at the context of this Russian involvement, country by country. For example, in Mali, right, where we have the Al-Qaeda-linked terrorist group holding the country to ransom, killing people, and causing mayhem and destruction. The French forces, in particular, have not been able, and the same thing for Niger. They have not been able to stop the insurgency. The French forces have not been able to stop the killings. So people are basically fed up. And that explains why when the coup took place in these countries, you saw the general populace celebrate those coups. Because for them, what was being experienced in those countries were not really democracies. So that explains why the civilian population has been a bit enthusiastic about the involvement of Russia. I don't think that scenario applies in Nigeria, because in the first place, currently Boko Haram influence has a bit whittled down. We don't have suicide bombings. We don't have mass killings by Boko Haram like we've had in the past, even though we still have killings going on in the country by those that they call bandits. So I agree that Russia is trying to expand its influence, but I want Africans to be careful. Because it is very easy to complain about Western imperialism, but Russia is also an imperialistic nation.
And Inibehe, going back to the issues in Nigeria, how is the Nigerian government reacting to the protests? And we saw none of the efforts made by Bola Tinubu in an effort to avoid the protests were effective. The people have pushed forward. What are the protesters' demands and the issues that need to be addressed?
Quite unfortunately, President Tinubu has not yet come to terms with the gravity of the matter. He has chosen to trivialize this. He has chosen to view this as an agenda by his political opponents to push him out of power. But the international community must realize that that is not what this protest is about. This protest is specifically about Nigerians who are hungry. People are demanding that the government should reverse its very terrible economic policies. Top on the list is fuel subsidy, right? Yes. The IMF and the World Bank have been pushing this policy that subsidy should be removed. But guess what? Even in very advanced democracies, governments still subsidize certain things. So what do Nigerians really benefit from their government? We have fuel in excess in our country, but the oil boom has only become a disaster. It has not brought prosperity to our country. So this argument about removing subsidy does not really persuade the general population. And when this current president came in on the 29th of May, he announced an end to subsidy. Immediately, the prices of goods, prices of transportation and services went up exponentially. Until date, the economy has not been able to recover from that shock. And that explains why people are demanding an end to subsidy.
Absolutely.
Electricity tariff is also another one. We are also demanding electoral reform. We are also asking the president to cut the size of governance. You must know that Tinubu has about 47 to 48 ministers, the highest in the history of our country. And this is taking place at a time that inflation is very high, there are no jobs, people don't have what to eat, and the government is still wasting money, to fund their very irresponsible lifestyle. That is why people are protesting. That is why people are demanding an end to bad governance. That is what this protest is about. But President Tinubu, quite sadly, has not deemed fit to speak to the issues, to address the demands of the protesters. And people have also been killed in the course of this protest. Many people have been killed, unprovoked, have been killed. There has been no attempt at investigation, no attempt at holding the security forces accountable, no attempt at giving some sort of solace to those who have lost their loved ones in the course of this protest. That explains why the country is so angry, why people are so upset that this is going on. Because I should stress that the current president himself has participated and sponsored protests in the past against former administrations, right? So for him to now be against protests is actually, an historical irony that this man is now saying anybody who protests against him is trying to push him out of power. Democracy can only be useful to Africans if it translates to good governance.
Yes. Inebehe, thank you very much for being with us on First Post Africa and for all your valued insights. Great to speak to you, as always.
Thank you. My pleasure speaking with you. Thank you.
Nozolabye ebigenda maaso in Nigeria mu bannaffe. The Genzis are protesting, are demonstrating, are yearning for their power, are asking for the stop corruption. Corruption must stop. The president must step down. They want a new leader because for him has failed. And the president is accusing the Genzis of being funded by Russia. Nti Russia yebateekamu ensimbi because they are moving around on the streets, demonstrating, waving Russian flags, chanting, welcome Putin, welcome Putin, Putin tusanze okulaba webale kujja, okikoze agenda, tumutwala. Kati president entegetegezi zikankanye, agamba Putin nno yandibanga ali mayoga waki binantwala. Nedda. Musajja ndeka nvaako ndekera akafo kange. The Genzi bagamba no, we are the Putin. We are the Putin, we are taking you down. Tukutwala tulina okustoppinga obukulembeze bwo kubanga twetaaga omukulembeze afaayo eriffe. Twetaaga omukulembeze ayagala the Genzi. Twetaaga omukulembeze obutalimu buli bwanguzi. Oba okitegeera wabula kyendabye Nigeria, it's a bit civilized. Sinaba police bwe kuba abantu miggo nga wano babasiba bwe bakola bichakali okujja kumbu bibali mu kusibera be balabudde bagenda okusiba be batambula nga bawuba bendera za Russia nti kubanga kimenya amateeka okuba mu nsendera ate n'owuba bendera y'ensendera kiba kitegeezera ensi ewambye eno. Ati gwe musango okagwe balina naye nga okwedemonstrating peacefully na kale abatonotono mwebali pikinya mu hand picking nate Uganda kisukkamuko kakati kiraga nti nno munna Uganda China olugendo nene okusinga ate kubanafa ba Africa abalala okulwanira eddembe lyo. Olabye the Genzis Kenya bali mu kwekalakasa bali mu 88 obali ekibuga bakisazeeko oyo kisanyaladde emirimu giganye nga beekalakasa 88 bagamba Ruto must gobo bali biremeddeko bagamba tebagenda kupowa bagala nga lutakoze eki ali wali kuddimwa. Kati ne baganda baffe ab'e Nigeria olabye kyebaliko mulimu gwe gumu bagamba president waabwe alina okusteppinga down, alina okuva mu ntebe bo basobole okufuna omukulembeze gwe beeyagalidde agenda okubakulembera obulungi, agenda okutwala ensi yaabwe mu maaso kubanga babikooye. They are tired of those old men who are corrupt, who are not caring about the Gen Z. The Gen Z everywhere, they are crying, they are struggling for life, they are not living life, they are just surviving. You see, jobs are difficult to get, and when you get a job, it's a low pay compared to what you're spending. You spend a lot and you earn little. Okitegeera akasente kofuna kache naye ate zofulumya mpitirivu ogenda okumalako omwezi nga zookoze omwezi ate zeedabolinze emirundi 3 kwena kwezo zo spendinze Kashwashitiza tolina kyosigazawo tojja ku developinga okolerera ya leero ate ng'okola n'olya n'ezo mu maaso zotannabakola. That's why the Genzis are now bitter, saying all old men must step down, must go, and we the Genzi get the power and plan for our future, because it's me and you, we the Genzi, who can plan for our future, who know what we want, where we want to take our country, where we want our kids to be. But for you now, you're old bazeyi.